Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silent Kane. I'm Kane, your guide through stories of mystery, danger, and the hidden truths of the underworld. Let's begin today's case. In the heart of a city where the streets are ruled by silence and fear, one man dares to walk alone in the eternal dark. Silas Kane is no ordinary detective. His past is cloaked in mystery, his presence a whisper among the shadows of the underworld. In a world where the mafia, drug trafficking, and criminal gangs govern with an iron fist, Silas stands as a lone sentinel, confronting dangers that would break lesser souls. Each case is not simply a pursuit of justice. It is a perilous journey through a labyrinth of lies, deception, and blood. Silas's investigations peel back the layers of a city rife with corruption, where allies can be foes and every truth is veiled beneath a carefully constructed lie. The underworld is a chessboard, and Silas the master tactician, navigating each move with fierce intelligence and unyielding courage. His story is one of shadows, shadows cast by betrayals that cut deep, by secrets from a haunted past clawing their way to the surface, by conspiracies that stretch into the very heart of power. The deeper Silas delves, the more the line between friend and enemy blurs. Danger stalks him relentlessly, from brutal gangsters to those in places of trust who pull strings in silence. Throughout the chapters of this story, you will walk with Silas through neon-lit alleys, abandoned warehouses, and the polished offices of the corrupt elite. You will witness tense battles, breathless chases, and moments of quiet reflection where Silas confronts not only his enemies, but the demons within himself. Every revelation brings him closer to the truth, and to the edge of darkness from which there may be no return. Silas Kane and the Eternal Dark is a tale of grit, resilience, and the unyielding quest for justice in a city that has long forgotten what it means to hope. The darkness is eternal, but so is the human spirit that refuses to be consumed. The city's heartbeat was a low, throbbing pulse beneath the steady drizzle. Rain fell in thin sheets, washing over cracked asphalt and slick cobblestones, pooling in gutters like liquid mirrors reflecting fractured neon signs. A soft fog clung to the street lamps, diffusing the harsh glare of the city's artificial lights, turning each one into a dull halo hovering over the darkened sidewalks. Silas Kane stood beneath one such lamp, his broad shoulders hunched against the biting chill that crept through his worn coat. The brim of his fedora cast a shadow over his eyes, sharp and calculating beneath the dim glow. His breath came in slow clouds, mingling with the mist that drifted past like ghostly tendrils. The city was alive, but only just. A sleeping beast waking slowly with an edge of menace, he let his gaze drift up and down the street, taking in the scene with practiced precision. Puddles reflected the flickering red and blue of a distant police cruiser, its wailing siren now silent, a fading echo of urgency. A group of figures shuffled out from a nearby bar, laughing loud and slurring, their carefree facade fragile as glass. Beyond them, a shuttered storefront bore graffiti tags, crude symbols marking territory long fought over by gangs hungry for control. Silas's hand brushed the cold steel of his pistol beneath his coat. He didn't trust the night, not anymore. Not after everything he'd seen, after everything he'd lost. The city was a maze of darkness and light, truth and lies, life and death. And he was a man walking its razor's edge. The sharp clang of a nearby dumpster lid snapped Silas's attention. His muscles tensed, senses sharpening. Movement flickered, a shadow slipping between buildings. "Show yourself," Silas called out. Voice low but firm that a young woman emerged, her clothes soaked from the rain, eyes wide with fear but burning with urgency. "Mara." She moved quickly to his side, breathless. "We don't have much time. Tell me what's happening," Silas said, voice calm but urgent. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket, hands trembling slightly. I got a tip. Black Lotus activity near the docks. Something big is coming. The name Black Lotus was a curse whispered among the city's criminals and honest alike, a syndicate as deadly as they were elusive. Silas had tangled with them before. Every confrontation left scars deeper than any bullet wound. He studied Mara's face, the seriousness etched into her sharp features. What kind of activity? Drug shipments, she said grimly. Weapons. And worse, there's talk of a plan that could bring the whole city to its knees. Silas's jaw tightened. The city was already bleeding. This could be the wound that killed it. They moved fast, slipping through alleyways slick with rain, the sounds of their footsteps swallowed by the night. Silas's mind raced through the possibilities, each darker than the last. He remembered the last raid, the burst of gunfire, the shattered crates, the faces of men who died still reaching for power. The docks were a twisted tangle of rusting ships, warehouses, and narrow gangways. The salty air mixed with the stench of fuel and rot. Shadows clung thick here, hiding danger in every corner. As they approached an old warehouse, lights flickered in the distance. Silas crouched low, signaling Mara to do the same. Through broken windows, he saw figures moving, armed men unloading crates with practiced efficiency. He drew his pistol silently, the weight familiar and cold in his hand. "This is it," he whispered. The operation was swift and brutal. Silas and Mara moved like ghosts, taking down guards silently where possible, guns raised only when necessary. The warehouse was a maze of crates and rusted machinery, each step calculated and cautious. Suddenly, a dog barked, sharp and urgent. The men inside were alerted. Gunfire erupted, echoing off steel walls. Silas ducked behind a stack of crates, returning fire with steady precision. Mara covered him, her shots deadly and true. Amid the chaos, Silas caught sight of a man slipping away toward a side exit. Without hesitation, he gave chase. The rain slicked the concrete as they ran through narrow corridors and up rickety stairs. The man was fast, but Silas's resolve was faster. Outside, the cold night air bit into his lungs. The man pushed forward to the edge of the pier. Silas tackled him hard, the two crashing to the wetwood planks. They struggled, fists and boots colliding in the relentless downpour. The man was desperate, but Silas's grip was unyielding. Finally, the man gasped, defeated. "Who sent you?" Silas demanded, voice harsh. The man's eyes flickered with fear and defiance. The city was a beast that never slept, and Silas Kane had returned to its restless shadows. Tonight was only the beginning. The man beneath him struggled weakly, rainwater running in rivulets down his slick hair, mixing with the grime and sweat on his face. Silas's grip tightened, the weight of years pressing down in this singular moment. This was more than just a man. He was a thread in the tangled web of the city's corruption. "Talk," Silas demanded again, voice cold and unyielding. The man swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously. "Look, I'm just a courier. I don't know names, only orders. The shipments, the docks, it's all controlled by someone higher up. A shadow, they call him the Serpent." Silas frowned. The Serpent, a name whispered in the darkest corners, the mastermind pulling strings that shaped the city's fate. No one had ever seen his face, but his influence was everywhere. A phantom controlling puppets in law enforcement, politics, and crime. "Where do I find this Serpent?" Silas pressed. The courier's lips tightened. "No one does. He moves like smoke. But if you're serious about stopping them, start by cutting their lifelines, supply routes through the harbor and the underground." Siren screamed closer now, sharp and insistent. Silas knew their time was running out. He shoved the man to his feet. "You're coming with me." The courier hesitated, then nodded, desperation overcoming fear. Back at the safe house, the faint hum of the city seeped through cracked windows, distant and indifferent. Silas spread maps and stolen documents across the table, tracing routes in red pen. Smuggling paths winding through warehouses, abandoned rail lines, and hidden docks. Mara poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs, her hands steady despite the tension thick in the air. "We have their footprint," she said quietly, "but they're adaptable. Every time we cut one off, they find another." Silas rubbed his temples, the weight of leadership heavy on him. "Then we hit them where it hurts. Disrupt the network from the inside." The courier, now named Ben, sat silently in a corner, his gaze flickering with uncertainty and regret. He was a reluctant witness to a war he wished he'd never joined. "Why help us?" Mara asked, eyes sharp that Ben's voice was low weary. "Because I've seen what happens when the Black Lotus wins. Families broken, lives destroyed. I'm done being a pawn." Silas nodded slowly. Trust was fragile, but it was all they had. Days blurred into nights as the trio moved through the city's underbelly, staking out warehouses, intercepting shipments, and gathering intel. Silas's mind never rested, haunted by memories of battles past and the lives lost along the way. One evening, under a bruised sky heavy with rain, Mara caught a glimpse of a familiar face at a seedy nightclub, a known lieutenant of the Black Lotus. Silas tensed, recognizing the man from faded photos and informant whispers. "This is our chance," Mara said, voice barely above a whisper. They planned carefully, waiting for the lieutenant to leave. When he did, Silas and Mara followed him through the twisting streets, shadows among shadows. The trail led to a decaying building, its windows boarded and its walls scarred by time. Inside, voices murmured, plans, threats, promises. Silas crept closer, listening. "We move at dawn," the lieutenant said. "The shipment will secure our hold over the eastern docks." Silas signaled Mara. "We stop them tonight." The raid was swift and chaotic, a clash of fire and fury in the hollowed halls. Silas's pistol cracked, echoing sharply as Mara covered their flank. The lieutenant fought fiercely, but Silas's years of training and resolve tipped the balance. When the dust settled, the lieutenant was handcuffed, his secrets laid bare. But victory was a fleeting illusion. The Black Lotus responded with ruthless precision. Attacks on allies, sabotage, and misinformation designed to fracture their fragile coalition. Silas sat alone in the dark, the weight of the city pressing down. The eternal dark was vast and unrelenting, but he was not done fighting. Not yet. The morning light crept reluctantly over the city's jagged skyline, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks and damp streets still glistening from the previous night's rain. A mist hovered low, weaving through the alleyways like a living thing, swallowing sounds and distorting the neon glow into ghostly streaks. Even as the city stirred to life, the slow buzz of traffic, the hum of early workers, the distant wail of a siren, there lingered a heavy silence beneath it all, a silence that whispered of danger yet to come. Silas Kane sat alone in a worn booth at a corner table in Ruby's Diner, a dive known to attract the city's lost souls and those who preferred the comfort of shadows. The scent of brewing coffee and frying bacon filled the cramped space, but inside Silas's mind, the chaos of last night's battle echoed louder than any clatter of plates or murmur of conversation. He stared down into his black coffee, swirling it absently as his steel-gray eyes traced the rim of the chipped ceramic mug. The faint tremor in his hands betrayed the calm he projected. His coat hung loosely on his shoulders, damp from the mist outside, and his hat lay on the table, brim bent and worn like the man who wore it, the lieutenant. The first real piece of the Black Lotus puzzle they'd captured, was locked away in an interrogation room somewhere beneath the precinct. But Silas knew better than to expect a quick confession. These men were born into lies and loyalty, their tongues as guarded as vaults. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Mara, sliding quietly into the seat opposite him. Her dark eyes were sharp, shadows beneath them telling of sleepless nights and endless worry. She didn't speak immediately, just watched him for a long moment before breaking the silence. "We got a problem," she said quietly, her voice low, carrying the weight of bad news. Silas nodded, bracing himself. "They're striking back. Last night's raid rattled them more than we thought. There were 3 explosions downtown, power substations targeted with precision. Chaos everywhere. People are scared." He clenched his jaw, the cold edge of determination sharpening in his gaze. The Black Lotus wasn't just a gang anymore. They were waging war on the city's very infrastructure. Silas knew the city could fall apart overnight if they weren't stopped. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of grim meetings and guarded conversations. At the precinct, Captain Reynolds awaited Silas in his cramped office, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the desk and a cigarette burning low in an ashtray. "Word is spreading fast," Reynolds said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Black Lotus is striking like vipers, fast, deadly, and unpredictable." Silas pulled a map from his bag, spreading it over the desk. Red pins marked the sites of the explosions and known Black Lotus operations, a web of destruction woven across the city. "We need to find their command center," Silas said, tapping the map. "Somewhere they're coordinating all this." Reynolds shook his head slowly. "If we knew that, we'd be there already. The serpent's a ghost. The deeper you dig, the more you realize how much is rotting under the surface. Cops, politicians, judges, everyone's got their price." Outside the precinct, Silas took a slow breath, the weight of the city pressing down. The eternal dark wasn't just the night. It was the corruption, the lies, the betrayals. It was the shadows inside every soul, including his own. His phone buzzed. A message from Calla. "Meet me. Urgent." The rendezvous point was a rundown bar on the east side, the kind of place where deals were made without words and secrets slipped through cracks like smoke. Inside the bar, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the metallic tang of spilled beer. Neon signs flickered unevenly, casting a sickly glow over patrons hunched over cracked tables. Calla sat alone in a booth at the back, her eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and resolve. Silas slid into the seat across from her. "What do you have?" Calla pulled a manila envelope from beneath her jacket, sliding it across the table. Inside were photographs, secret meetings, faces of men Silas didn't recognize, but who radiated menace. Alongside them were snippets of intercepted communications, coded and cryptic. "They're not just gangsters," Calla said softly. "They're the puppeteers, the real rulers behind the scenes. The Black Lotus is just their mask." Silas frowned, studying the evidence. This was bigger than he imagined. Tendrils reaching into City Hall, the police department, even the courts. Over the following days, Silas and Mara plunged deeper into the city's dark veins. They followed leads to abandoned warehouses, shadowed rail yards, and forgotten tunnels beneath the streets. Each step felt like wading through a swamp of lies and danger. Surveillance became their lifeline. Hours spent watching broken faces exchange whispered messages, watching shadows trade secrets beneath flickering streetlights. Silas's nights were restless, haunted by flashes of memory. Faces lost, betrayals cut deep, the ever-present ache of a city bleeding from unseen wounds point one evening. While staking out a dilapidated apartment block, Mara spotted a courier, a man with nervous eyes and quick hands, known to ferry messages for the Black Lotus. Silas followed silently as the courier slipped inside. The building's halls were narrow and reeking of damp and decay. Walls peeled with age, graffiti and scars marking territory claimed and lost. Silas's footsteps were quiet, every sense alert for the slightest sound at a door ahead cracked open, spilling low voices into the hallway. Silas crept closer, catching fragments of conversation, plans for a shipment, mentions of the serpent, and warnings of betrayal, he motioned Mara forward. The tension was a live wire in the air. One wrong move, one careless breath, and the fragile thread holding their cover would snap. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a man stepped out, eyes wide with surprise and alarm. Silas raised his hands in a gesture of calm. "We're not here to hurt you," he said softly. "We want answers." The man hesitated, then nodded slowly, leading them inside in the cramped apartment. Lit only by a single flickering bulb, the man revealed himself as a reluctant pawn in the Black Lotus's game. His voice was a whispered confession, a tale of corruption, of deals forged in shadows, and of the elusive figure known only as the Serpent. Silas listened, absorbing the pieces of a puzzle that stretched far beyond what he'd imagined. The city's rot ran deep, poisoning everything it touched. But the deeper Silas dug, the more dangerous his quest became. Returning to the safe house late one night, he found Mara waiting, her face tight with concern. "They've been here," she said, gesturing to the ransacked room. Files torn, evidence scattered. A clear message that Silas's jaw clenched. The Black Lotus was watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. Outside, the city breathed in and out like a wounded beast. The eternal dark was no longer just a backdrop. It was an active force, pulling Silas into its depths, but he was ready. He had to be. The fight was far from over. The rain had stopped, but the city's damp chill clung to Silas Kane like a second skin. He stood on the cracked pavement of an alleyway behind an abandoned subway entrance, the air thick with the scent of wet concrete and rust. Above, the fading neon glow of a distant bar flickered weakly through the fog, casting pale shadows on the graffiti-tagged walls. This was the edge of the city's world, a forgotten place where darkness gathered like a living thing. Silas adjusted the collar of his coat and tightened his grip on the flashlight, the familiar weight of his pistol resting beneath his jacket. Tonight, he would descend beneath the surface, beneath the city's veil, to uncover the secrets hidden in its forgotten tunnels. The cold bit at his fingers as he pulled open the rusted gate leading down the stairs. The metal protested with a long, drawn-out creak that echoed down into the darkness below. Silas stepped carefully onto the cracked concrete steps, each footfall swallowed by the cavernous silence. The smell hit him almost immediately, a mixture of damp earth, stale water, and something metallic, sharp, and bitter. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with the scent of forgotten years. He could see the bottom of the stairs. The light from the street vanished completely. Silas flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through thick dust and cobwebs, illuminating broken tiles and faded warning signs. The tracks stretched out ahead, disappearing into blackness like a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. He knew these tunnels were once part of the city's subway system, abandoned after a partial collapse years ago. Officially sealed and off-limits, but unofficially a hidden artery for the city's criminals. Smugglers, gangs, and worse used these forgotten paths to move goods and messages beyond the reach of the law. Silas's footsteps echoed softly as he followed the tracks, his senses alert. Every sound, the drip of water, the scurry of unseen rats, the distant hum of the city above, sharpened his focus. He was a hunter in a world of shadows. As he moved deeper, the narrow tunnel opened into a larger cavern where faint light flickered ahead. Silas approached cautiously, the beam of his flashlight scanning crates stacked high along the walls. The faint murmur of voices floated through the stale air. Hushed, urgent, and dangerous, he ducked behind a rusted support pillar, watching a small group of men gathered around a makeshift table. Their faces were obscured by the flickering lantern, but their posture and clipped words told Silas they were not ordinary criminals. These were the Black Lotus's lieutenants, orchestrating their next move. One man held a small, heavy package marked with the Black Lotus emblem, a symbol Silas had come to fear. They spoke in low tones about shipments and betrayals, about the city's corrupt heart and the shadows that controlled it. Silas's heart beat faster. This was the confirmation he needed, proof that the Black Lotus's reach stretched deep beneath the city's surface, Suddenly, a loose floorboard creaked beneath his boot. Head snapped up. "Who's there?" a harsh voice demanded. Silas acted without hesitation, drawing his pistol and firing into the dim space. Bullets kicked up dust and shattered crates. The men returned fire, their shots echoing violently through the tunnels. The chase began, a brutal game of cat and mouse through narrow corridors, broken stairwells, and forgotten passageways. Silas's breath came fast, his mind sharp with focus as he dodged and weaved through the maze at T1 point. He collided with a figure in the shadows. A vicious brawl erupted, fists and elbows flying in the oppressive darkness. Silas's training and raw instinct kept him alive, but he knew this fight was only a prelude to the storm coming for the city. Breathing hard, Silas finally burst through a trapdoor leading to a dilapidated warehouse at the city's edge. He had survived the underworld's grasp this time, but he was more certain than ever that the darkness beneath the city was alive and hungry. In his hand, a ledger, the Black Lotus's secret financial map, coded and complex, but the key to unraveling their empire. As dawn broke, the city's first light creeping through smog and steel, Silas Kane vanished into the crowd, a lone detective facing the eternal dark, ready to tear it apart piece by piece. The warehouse's stale air was heavy with the scent of oil and mildew, mingling with the faint tang of rusted metal. Silas paused, allowing the first pale rays of dawn to filter through cracked windows, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to twist like specters on the walls. The ledger he'd snatched from the tunnels felt like a weight in his hands, not just paper and ink, but the lifeblood of the Black Lotus's empire. His eyes scanned the room, every creak and whisper setting his senses on edge. He wasn't alone. From the far corner, a soft shuffle, footsteps careful but deliberate. Silas's hand instinctively moved to the pistol beneath his coat, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. That a figure emerged, cloaked in darkness, features hidden beneath a hood. Silas tensed but held his fire, looking for answers. The voice was smooth, laced with something both dangerous and familiar. Silas narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, revealing a woman, her gaze sharp and steady, lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "Call me Vera. I've been watching you." Silas's heart skipped. Vera, a ghost from a past he tried to bury. Once an ally, now a mystery wrapped in shadows. "What do you want?" Silas asked, voice guarded. "To help you," Vera said simply. "But first you have to trust me." Silas hesitated, the ledger heavy between them. Trust was a rare currency in this city, more fragile than glass, more dangerous than any weapon that he studied her. Searching for the truth behind those piercing eyes. Why now? Why help me? Vera's gaze flickered, haunted, because the serpent's no longer content to hide. The city is a chessboard, Silas, and the pieces are moving fast. If we don't act, everything we've fought for will be lost. Silas's mind raced. The serpent, the elusive puppet master whose name haunted every whispered conversation. To confront him meant peeling back the city's darkest layers, risking everything. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, but we do this my way." Vera's smile deepened. Wouldn't expect anything less. Together, they pored over the ledger's cryptic entries, coded shipments, clandestine meetings, secret transactions hidden beneath layers of deception. Each page was a thread leading deeper into the Black Lotus's web. Mara arrived as the sun climbed higher, her expression grim but resolute. "We've got movement," she said, dropping a dossier on the table. "New intel. A meeting tonight at the pier. High-level players." Silas glanced up, determination hardening his features. The time for waiting was over. Night fell like a curtain as the trio made their way toward the harbor district. The salty tang of sea air mixed with diesel and decay, and the city's eternal hum was punctuated by the distant call of foghorns. Dock workers moved like ghosts among stacks of shipping containers, their faces shadowed beneath heavy coats and hats. Silas's eyes scanned the area, alert for the slightest hint of danger Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "They're expecting trouble. Security's tight." They slipped through shadows and narrow alleyways, using forgotten passages known only to those who live beneath the city's surface. The pier stretched out like a skeletal hand over the dark water, lit only by a few flickering lamps and the cold glare of moonlight. Silas's heart pounded as they neared the meeting point. A massive container marked with a black lotus symbol. From the shadows emerged a group of men, suits and street thugs alike. Their conversations sharp and urgent. Silas's fingers itched on his pistol as he prepared to move. Suddenly, a sharp crack. A gunshot split the air. Chaos erupted. Gunfire rang out, echoing over the water. Silas dove behind a crate, returning fire with cold precision. Mara covered their flank, her shots swift and deadly. The men scattered, shouting orders and firing blindly into the night. Silas's world narrowed. Instincts, training, and sheer will driving him through the storm of bullets and fury. Amid the chaos, Vera disappeared into the fray, moving with lethal grace. Silas caught a glimpse of her confronting a burly man, a lieutenant. Their fight brutal and swift. When she reemerged, bruised but unbroken, she held a small device, a tracker. "This," she said breathlessly, "will lead us to the Serpent." As dawn broke over the harbor, the last shots faded into silence. The city was wounded but alive. Silas Kane stood among the wreckage, a lone sentinel against the eternal dark. The hunt had only just begun. The early morning sun cast long, amber fingers over the harbor's wreckage. Silas stood quietly by the edge of the water, the cold breeze tugging at his coat and stirring memories he'd long tried to bury. The tracker Vera had recovered was small, just a blinking light on a black box. But it was a beacon in the endless maze of the city's underworld. He glanced at Mara, who was crouched by the crates, scanning the aftermath of last night's firefight. Her jaw was clenched, eyes sharp with determination. "We've stirred the hornet's nest," she said, voice low. "They'll be coming after us now, harder, faster." Silas nodded. "Let them come. We have what we need." Back at the safe house, the mood was tense but purposeful. Maps covered every inch of the wall, lines and circles tracing possible routes and hideouts. Silas, Mara, and Vera leaned over the table, the tracker's faint signal pulsing in the quiet room. "We're close," Vera said, fingers tapping the device. "The Serpent doesn't stay in one place for long, but this tracker is giving us a steady trail." Silas's eyes darkened with focus. "We have to move carefully. One wrong step and the whole operation blows." Hours passed as they planned their next move. The city's pulse outside was relentless. Sirens, shouting, distant gunfire. The eternal dark wasn't just a place. It was a force shaping lives, decisions, and fate. As night fell again, they prepared to follow the signal deep into the city's forgotten tunnels. Places where light dared not tread and trust was a luxury. The descent was slower this time, every step calculated. The tunnels felt alive, breathing with secrets and dangers. Silas's flashlight caught glimpses of old graffiti warnings, crumbled supports, and pools of stagnant water reflecting faint light like shards of broken mirrors. Their only guide was the tracker's steady, pulsing glow. Suddenly, the signal strengthened. A hidden chamber lay just beyond a collapsed wall, partially covered by rubble and debris. Silas pushed the stones aside, revealing a narrow passage leading into blackness. They exchanged tense glances and stepped inside. The chamber was vast and cold, filled with rows of crates marked with obscure symbols. At its center, a large metal table held blueprints, maps, and a glowing laptop. A nerve center. As Silas approached, footsteps echoed from the shadows. The serpent's men had found them. Gunfire erupted. Silas and Mara dove for cover, exchanging shots with unseen enemies. The air filled with smoke and the sharp scent of gunpowder. Vera moved swiftly, her movements precise and deadly. In the chaos, Silas caught sight of a figure slipping through a side exit. A shadow among shadows. Without hesitation, he pursued, bursting into a narrow corridor that twisted like a serpent itself. The chase was desperate, breath ragged, heart pounding. He cornered the figure in a dead end. A man with cold eyes and a sinister smile. "Welcome to my world, detective," the man hissed. The fight was brutal and swift, a clash of wills and skill. Silas's fists met steel and bone, each blow echoing years of pain and determination. Finally, the man fell, breathless and defeated. Before Silas could press for answers, a sudden explosion rocked the chamber behind them, the building trembling as flames licked the walls. Silas looked back. The eternal dark threatened to swallow everything. The city was a restless beast, its breath a blend of exhaust fumes, rain-soaked asphalt, and the faint tang of salt from the harbor. Silas Kane sat on the fire escape of the safe house, the early morning chill biting at his skin beneath his coat. Below, the street hummed with life. The muffled footsteps of workers, the distant roar of traffic, a siren wailing far away. Yet in Silas's mind, a different sound echoed louder, the relentless ticking of time running out. His fingers absently traced the worn leather cover of the ledger that lay beside him, the Black Lotus's financial Bible. Every page was a tangled web of numbers and coded names, a blueprint of corruption stretching from shadowed warehouses to gilded offices. The longer Silas studied it, the more he realized how deep the serpent's influence truly ran. This wasn't just a criminal syndicate. It was a dark empire built on fear, loyalty bought with blood, and secrets so tightly kept they threatened to choke the city itself. The door behind him creaked, and Mara joined him on the fire escape, her silhouette framed by the flickering hallway light. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived too much, scars etched beneath her skin and in her gaze. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly, lighting a cigarette and offering it to Silas. He shook his head, managing a tired smile. "Sleep's a luxury I gave up years ago." She exhaled smoke, watching it curl into the cold air. "The ledger's more than just numbers. I found something, a pattern in the transactions. Shell companies funneling money into political campaigns, bribes disguised as donations." Silas's eyes narrowed. If the serpent controls the city council, we're fighting against more than just gangsters. They returned inside, the safe house's cramped interior filled with maps, photographs, and hastily scribbled notes pinned across the walls like a constellation of clues. Vera was already there, fingers flying over a laptop keyboard, the blue glow casting sharp shadows on her determined face. "We're running out of time," she said without looking up. "The auction's set for midnight at the docks. The shipment is bigger than we thought. Weapons, drugs, possibly even human lives." Silas leaned over the laptop, tracing the route of the shipment through port authorities and logistics companies, all tied back to the Black Lotus. His mind raced. The stakes were higher than ever. Night crept over the city like a predator as Silas, Mara, and Vera prepared for the operation. The air outside was thick with mist and menace, the streets slick with rain that reflected the harsh glow of streetlights. Each step toward the docks was a step deeper into the serpent's lair. Silas's heart hammered in rhythm with the distant clang of shipping cranes and the low murmur of waves against rusted hulls. Around them, the docks stretched into darkness, a labyrinth of containers, broken machinery, and guarded secrets. They moved like ghosts, slipping through shadows and peeling paint, the cold biting into their bones. Every alley held a threat. Every sound might be the whisper of a hidden enemy. Ahead, flickering floodlights illuminated a massive warehouse, its walls scarred by graffiti and neglect. Figures moved inside. Armed men, officials, buyers, all part of the twisted dance that kept the city's underbelly alive. Silas signaled Mara and Vera to spread out. He slipped closer to the perimeter, heart pounding but mind razor sharp. The night smelled of diesel and desperation, the promise of violence hanging thick in the air. Suddenly, a sharp voice pierced the silence. "You're not supposed to be here." Silas spun, gun drawn, to face a guard stepping out from the shadows. The man's eyes gleamed with a cold fire, a shotgun resting heavy in his hands. Gunfire shattered the quiet. Silas ducked behind a container as bullets kicked up gravel and sparks. Mara's voice came through the radio, steady despite the chaos. "Contact on your left. Moving in." He returned fire, senses blazing, every shot a calculated step in a deadly dance. Amid the storm of gunfire, Vera moved with lethal grace, neutralizing threats with swift efficiency. Silas caught her eye for a brief moment. A silent pact between warriors, the battle raged, fierce and unforgiving, until the remaining guards fled into the night, leaving behind shattered crates and the acrid scent of gunpowder. Breathing hard, Silas scanned the wreckage. The shipment was real, weapons, crates stamped with ominous markings, and a hidden room sealed behind a false wall. With Mara's help, Silas pried open the panel, revealing a trove of documents and digital drives. His fingers trembled slightly as he gathered the evidence. The final pieces of the puzzle. Back at the safe house, they pored over the new data. Names, locations, encrypted messages, all pointing toward the Serpent's true identity and next move. Silas's eyes burned with resolve. The city's fate hung in the balance. The eternal dark was closing in, but so was the light of justice. The night outside the safe house was heavy with rain, tapping a steady rhythm against the cracked window pane. Inside, the trio huddled around the battered table, the blue glow from the laptop casting long shadows that flickered across their tired faces. Silas leaned forward, eyes scanning the decrypted files Vera had managed to extract from the seized drives. The code was dense, a labyrinth of false trails and misdirection, but Vera's skill had cut through the noise. "Look here," Vera said quietly, pointing to a series of transactions linking city council members to offshore accounts. "The Black Lotus has its claws deep in City Hall. Campaign funds, kickbacks, property deals. They've been buying silence and loyalty for years." Mara shook her head slowly. "It's worse than we thought. The Serpent's not just a gang leader. He's the architect of the city's corruption." Silas's jaw tightened. That explains the lieutenant's silence back at the precinct. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. The room fell silent except for the rain's steady patter. Outside, the city's distant sirens wailed, a haunting soundtrack to their grim reality. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Silas said finally. "Expose the money trail, disrupt their operation before they can move the next shipment." Vera nodded. "There's one place left, the financial hub of their empire. A gala fundraiser at the governor's mansion in 3 nights. High profile, heavy security, but also where the biggest transfers happen." Mara's eyes gleamed with determination. "If we can get in, we can gather evidence, maybe even find the Serpent." Preparation was meticulous. Silas studied the mansion's layout, memorized security rotations, and rehearsed cover stories. The night before the gala, tension coiled tight in his chest, every breath shallow and deliberate. When the evening finally came, Silas donned a tailored suit, the weight of his pistol hidden beneath a crisp shirt. Mara, dressed elegantly, slipped into her role as the governor's aide, while Vera worked the perimeter as their eyes and ears. The mansion gleamed under floodlights, a palace of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Guests in tuxedos and gowns flowed through grand halls, laughter and music blending with the clinking of glasses. Silas's gaze swept the room, searching for faces, allies and enemies alike. His pulse quickened as he spotted a man matching the Serpent's lieutenant from the docks, chatting casually with a senator. Moving with practiced ease, Silas approached the man, exchanging pleasantries while discreetly slipping a small listening device into his coat pocket. Behind the scenes, Vera hacked into the mansion's security network, opening hidden channels for surveillance. Hours passed in a blur of whispered conversations, coded messages, and stolen glances. Silas collected snippets, hints of a plan to move a massive shipment through the city's underground tunnels, timed with the mayor's upcoming speech. Suddenly, a sharp commotion erupted near the grand staircase. Mara intercepted a scuffle. A bodyguard had recognized her from the docks. The situation escalated quickly. Silas moved to assist, his voice low but commanding. "Stay calm. Follow my lead." With deft precision, they slipped through service corridors, avoiding guards and cameras. Outside, rain had returned, the cold night masking their escape. Back at the safe house, they pieced together the evening's findings. The serpent's web was vast, but cracks were beginning to show. Silas stared at the ledger again, the weight of responsibility pressing down. The city's fate depended on what they did next. The eternal dark was closing in, but the first rays of dawn were breaking. The gray light of dawn seeped through grimy windows as the safe house stirred awake. Silas sat alone at the table, the ledger open before him like a forbidden scripture. Every line, every name, was a thread weaving together the city's tangled underworld, the empire of the serpent. His fingers traced the ink, but his mind was elsewhere, drifting back to the gala, the tension, the near miss that could have ended everything. That sharp flare of adrenaline, the fleeting glimpse of the serpent's lieutenant, the echo of footsteps down hidden corridors. The room felt small and suffocating. Outside, the city was waking, unaware of the battle raging in shadows that a knock on the door pulled Silas from his reverie. Mara stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of coffee, her face drawn but resolute. "Sleep's for the dead," she said dryly, setting a cup before him. Silas offered a tired smile. "Or for those who want to survive." Vera arrived moments later, eyes bright despite exhaustion. "We've got movement," she said, dropping a file onto the table. Intercepted chatter. The serpent's planning the shipment's final move. Tonight, Silas's jaw clenched. No mistakes this time. That evening, the city's streets were slick with rain, reflections shimmering beneath flickering streetlights. Silas, Mara, and Vera prepared once again to dive into the underworld's belly, the old subway tunnels, where the serpent's power was strongest. The descent was cold, the air thick with dust and decay. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing crumbling walls etched with faded warnings and graffiti. Silas's heart thundered. Each step was a step closer to the abyss. The tunnels twisted like a serpent itself, narrow and claustrophobic. They moved in silence, senses razor sharp, weapons ready. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every sound a trap. Ahead, muffled voices echoed. A meeting in progress. They peered around a corner, spotting crates stacked high, guarded by armed men. The serpent's shipment was here. Suddenly, a light flicked on. A spotlight trained on their position. "Get them!" A voice barked. Gunfire erupted, shattering the silence. Silas fired back, diving behind crates as bullets flew like deadly rain. Mara and Vera flanked the enemy, their shots precise and deadly. The battle was fierce, the tunnel walls echoing with gunfire and shouted orders. Amid the chaos, Silas spotted a figure slipping away. The serpent himself, cloaked in shadow. The chase was brutal, twisting through tunnels, up crumbling stairwells, and out into the rain-slick streets. Silas pushed harder, every muscle burning, the city's cold night pressing in. He caught the serpent at an abandoned pier, a place where shadows swallowed whole. The final confrontation was a savage ballet of violence and wit. The serpent fought with the desperation of a cornered beast, his face a mask of fury and fear, but Silas's resolve was steel. Each blow was a strike for justice, for the city bleeding beneath the dark. Finally, the serpent lay defeated, bound and broken. As police sirens approached, Silas looked out over the harbor, rain mingling with sweat on his brow. The eternal dark had been pierced, but the city's scars would run deep. The gray dawn seeped slowly over the city skyline, casting long fingers of cold light through the cracked window panes of the precinct. Inside, the stale air was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and paper, mingling with the low murmur of officers stirring to life. For Silas Kane, morning was no reprieve. It was a ticking clock, a reminder that the war beneath the city's surface was far from over. He sat in a worn leather chair, elbows resting on the scarred wooden table, eyes fixed on the scattered files that mapped out the latest moves of the Black Lotus. Names, dates, transactions, each one a thread in a web of betrayal and violence. Mara leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp and calculating. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice low but carrying a hard edge. The arrest last night stirred more than the Black Lotus. Someone inside the department is leaking to them. Silas didn't flinch. "A mole," he said simply, though the word tasted bitter on his tongue. "Exactly. And they're good, covering tracks, sending false intel, sabotaging our moves." The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of betrayal pressing down like a suffocating fog. Across town, Detective Harris sat in a dimly lit interrogation room, the harsh light illuminating sweat beading on his pale forehead. His eyes darted nervously as Silas entered, the atmosphere thick with unspoken history. "Why, Harris?" Silas's voice was quiet but charged, each word laced with years of disappointment. "Why turn your back on everything we swore to protect?" Harris swallowed hard, voice trembling. "You don't understand, Kane. The Black Lotus, they offered me protection. My family, protection." Silas's jaw clenched. "You made your choice. No one forced you." The silence between them was heavy, filled with the echoes of broken trust. Back at the safe house, Silas paced, the city's distant sirens a grim symphony outside the cracked window. He knew the mole's exposure was just the beginning. The Black Lotus would retaliate, harder and more ruthlessly. "We need to flush them out," Silas said, meeting Mara and Vera's determined gazes. "And we need to do it before they bury us." The following days were a blur of surveillance, encrypted messages, and covert meetings. Every call, every text was analyzed for the faintest hint of deception. The tension was a live wire stretched taut, each misstep potentially fatal. Vera's fingers danced over her laptop keys as she decrypted communications intercepted from burner phones. "There's a meeting," she announced. "Tomorrow night, Warehouse 17 on the East Edge." Mara's voice was steady. "It's a trap, but it's the only lead we've got." The warehouse stood at the city's edge like a graveyard monument, cold, dark, and forgotten. Its rusted gates groaned as the trio slipped inside, shadows merging with shadows. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the metallic scent of blood. Crates were stacked high, whispers bounced off concrete walls, and every corner held the threat of violence. Suddenly, voices erupted in the dimness. "Did you hear? The cops are onto us. Let's finish this, once and for all." Gunfire exploded, ricocheting off steel beams. Silas ducked behind a crate, returning fire with deadly precision. Mara flanked their attackers, her shots sharp and unforgiving. Vera moved like a shadow, her calm presence a sharp contrast to the chaos. Amidst the storm of bullets and smoke, Silas spotted the mole slipping away, clutching a thick dossier. His heart pounded as he gave chase, every step heavy with the knowledge that failure meant the destruction of everything they fought for. The chase twisted through crumbling hallways and over piles of debris, the city's underbelly a labyrinth of despair and decay. Finally, Silas cornered the traitor in a narrow alcove, the man's face a mask of fear and defiance. Why betray us? Silas demanded, voice steady but fierce. Because power belongs to those who take it, the mole sneered. You're just a pawn in a game you'll never win. Silas's response was swift, a strike fueled by years of betrayal and determination. The fight was brief but brutal. The mole collapsed, gasping, defeated. Handcuffed and beaten, the mole was dragged away by authorities. But Silas knew the war was far from over. Shadows lingered in every corner, and the city's darkness was patient as he gazed out over the rain-soaked streets. Silas Kane vowed he would expose every hidden enemy, even if it meant walking through hell itself. The eternal dark would not claim him. The brittle dawn crept into the precinct's worn corners, casting long, cold shadows across the desks cluttered with cold coffee cups, cigarette butts, and case files. Outside, the city stirred like a wounded animal, restless and uneasy. Inside, Silas Kane sat motionless, staring at the scattered photographs and maps that chronicled the Black Lotus's bloody reign. The weight of the ledger pressed against his satchel like a ticking time bomb. His jaw clenched. The serpent was captured, but the wound in the city's heart was far from healed. He looked up as Mara entered, the dim light catching the sharp angles of her face, eyes dark and tired but unyielding. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We've got a leak," she said, voice low and sharp, someone feeding information to the Black Lotus. "Everything we do is compromised." Silas exhaled slowly, the taste of betrayal bitter in his mouth. A mole in the department. Someone close. Mara's gaze flickered briefly, but she held his eyes steady. "We don't know how deep yet, but if we don't find them, we're all dead." The room felt suddenly smaller, closing in around them like the walls of a tomb. Silas rubbed the stubble on his chin, the shadows beneath his eyes deepening. Trust, something he had long since learned to bury, was now a liability. "Who do you suspect?" he asked quietly. Mara hesitated, then shook her head. "No one obvious, but I've been watching Harris. He's nervous, too nervous." Silas's mind flashed to the man who had once been a trusted partner. The thought was a jagged knife twisting in his gut. Later, in an interrogation room steeped in fluorescent harshness, Silas sat across from Detective Harris. The man's usual confidence was replaced by twitchy glances and a sweating brow. His hands trembled on the table. "Harris," Silas began, voice steady but cold. "Why turn your back on us?" Harris swallowed hard, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "You don't understand what they offered. Protection for my family. I had no choice." Silas's expression darkened. "There's always a choice. You chose the darkness." Harris's jaw tightened. "You don't know what it's like to have threats hanging over your head every day. The Black Lotus isn't just a gang, they're a god." The room was silent, except for the buzz of the flickering light overhead. Silas studied the man, the weight of betrayal settling deep in his chest. Back at the safe house, Silas paced, each step measured, mind racing. The knowledge that their enemies were now inside the very precinct they worked in sent cold shivers down his spine. "We have to root out the mole," he told Mara and Vera, "before they bury us." The trio huddled over maps and files, tracing communications and phone records. Vera's fingers flew over a laptop, decrypting messages and cross-referencing names. "They're organizing a meeting tomorrow night," Vera said, eyes glued to the screen. "Warehouse 17, east edge of the city." The warehouse was a relic of forgotten industry. A skeleton of rusted steel beams and broken glass windows, standing like a forgotten graveyard on the city's fringe. Silas, Mara, and Vera moved through the shadowed streets, their breaths visible in the cold night air. Each step was heavy with the knowledge that this could be a trap, but it was the only lead they had. Inside, the stale air was thick with dust and tension. Crates were stacked high like silent sentinels, and voices echoed off the concrete walls. Whispers of planning, threats, and loyalty tested. Suddenly, a voice snapped. The cops are on to us. It's time to end this. Gunfire erupted, shattering the silence with a deafening roar. Silas dubbed behind a crate as bullets tore through the air. Mara's shots rang out, precise and deadly. Vera moved through the chaos like a shadow, calm and lethal. The warehouse became a maelstrom of smoke, fear, and violence. Amid the chaos, Silas caught sight of a figure slipping away, clutching a thick dossier. His heart thundered as he gave chase, dodging falling debris and weaving through narrow corridors. The city's dark underbelly swallowed them as they ran, a labyrinth of decay and despair. Finally, Silas cornered the traitor in a crumbling alcove. The man's face was twisted in fear and defiance. Why betray us? Silas demanded, breath ragged. Because power belongs to those who take it, the mole spat. You're a pawn. You never understood the game. Silas's hand tightened into a fist. The fight was brief, brutal, a release of all the anger and pain bottled inside. The mole was subdued and handed over to the authorities, but the victory felt hollow. Silas stared out the rain-soaked streets from the safe house window, the city's endless gray stretching before him. The eternal dark was still there, patient, waiting, but so was Silas Kane, and he would fight until the last shadow was chased away. The early morning fog clung to the city's streets like a shroud, muffling the sounds of the waking world. Silas Kane moved silently through the alleyways, his senses alert to the slightest shift, a shadow, a whisper, a breath of danger. The city was a labyrinth of secrets, and today, the maze seemed particularly twisted. Behind the cold steel of the safe house door, Mara and Vera prepared for the day's mission. The capture of the mole had cracked open the Black Lotus's defenses, but had also ignited a furious retaliation. The veil of deception was lifting, revealing layers of lies and treachery that stretched beyond anything they had imagined. Silas's mind replayed the mole's last words, bitter and accusing. You're a pawn. You never understood the game. That phrase lingered in his thoughts. What game was the mole talking about? And who was truly pulling the strings? Silas met Mara and Vera at a nondescript cafe near the waterfront, its peeling paint and cracked windows disguising the urgency that hummed beneath their casual demeanors. They huddled over steaming cups of black coffee, discussing the intercepted communications that hinted at a deeper conspiracy. The Black Lotus isn't just a gang, Vera said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're embedded in the city's political and economic systems. The mole was just a surface layer. Mara nodded. We need to find the puppet master, the one hiding behind the veil of deception. Silas's jaw tightened. And we need proof. Concrete evidence. Their plan was risky, but necessary. To infiltrate a gala hosted by a powerful city official rumored to have ties with the Black Lotus. A night where alliances would be forged, deals struck, and secrets traded under the glittering chandeliers. Dressed in tailored suits and armed with forged credentials, Silas and Mara prepared to step into a world of polished smiles and hidden daggers. Vera would monitor the operation from the shadows, hacking security systems and feeding real-time intel as they arrived at the mansion. The grand facade glittered under floodlights, a stark contrast to the city's decay. Guests in tuxedos and gowns floated through the halls, their laughter and conversation a veil masking the rot beneath. Silas's gaze scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces, politicians, business moguls, and shadowy figures whose names were whispered in the darkest corners of the city. His heart pounded with the weight of anticipation and danger. Mara slipped beside him, her eyes sharp. Stay close. One wrong move, and this night could be our last. They moved with practiced ease, blending into the crowd while subtly gathering information. Silas's fingers brushed against a concealed pistol beneath his jacket, a reminder of the stakes. As the evening unfolded, they intercepted whispers of an upcoming shipment, larger and more dangerous than before. The Black Lotus was planning something catastrophic, a move that could plunge the city into chaos. Suddenly, a hand grabbed Silas's arm. He turned sharply to face a man with a cold smile, the Serpent's lieutenant. Well, Detective Kane. I wonder when you'd show up. Silas's eyes narrowed. This isn't your playground anymore. The lieutenant's smile faded. Careful, Kane. In this game, everyone wears a mask. A tense dance of words ensued, each testing the other's resolve. Silas knew this encounter was no accident. The lieutenant was sending a warning as the night deepened. Silas and Mara gathered the evidence they needed. Documents, recordings, and the faint trace of a plan that could topple the city's fragile balance. Retreating to the safe house, they pieced together the puzzle. The veil was lifting, but the serpent was still slithering in the shadows, ready to strike. The city's lights blurred in the rain-streaked window as Silas stared into the darkness. The fight was far from over. The veil of deception was thick, but beneath it lay the truth, a truth worth dying for. The rain outside intensified, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windows of the safe house. Inside, the air was thick with tension as Silas, Mara, and Vera gathered around the scattered files and digital evidence. The elegant facade of the gala had hidden more than just champagne and polite conversation. It masked a sinister network of corruption and betrayal. Vera's fingers flew over the keyboard, decrypting a set of encrypted files they'd managed to smuggle from the mansion's security system. These are financial records, she explained, voice tense. They show transfer payments disguised as charitable donations, but the money is flowing right into Black Lotus accounts. It's a money laundering operation that involves city officials, business leaders, even some members of law enforcement. Silas leaned in, eyes scanning the data. This isn't just crime. It's a system designed to keep the city under control. Mara's face hardened, and it's all protected by the very people sworn to stop it. A sudden beep broke the silence. Vera's laptop screen flickered with an incoming message, an anonymous tip. Meet at Pier 9. Midnight. Come alone. Silas exchanged a look with Mara. This could be a trap, but it could also be our chance. The night air was cold and sharp as Silas made his way toward the pier. The harbor was a maze of shipping containers, cranes towering like skeletal giants against the moonlit sky. Fog curled over the water's surface, swallowing sounds and casting eerie shadows. Each step echoed in the silence, amplifying the growing tension in his chest. The city's heartbeat seemed to slow, synchronizing with the slow drip of water and distant calls of night birds. To the edge of the pier, a figure waited, a woman cloaked in a heavy coat, her face obscured by the hood. Silas approached cautiously. "You're Silas Kane?" she said, voice low and urgent. "I have information about the Black Lotus, about the Serpent's true plan." Silas studied her, wary but intrigued. "Why come to me?" "Because the darkness is deeper than you think," she said, pulling back her hood to reveal sharp, determined eyes. "And if you want to survive, you'll need allies you don't expect." The woman introduced herself as Elena, a former insider turned whistleblower. She spoke of secret shipments, political assassinations, and a betrayal that reached into the highest echelons of power. Every word tightened the noose around the city's fate. Before Silas could ask more, footsteps approached, the harsh crunch of gravel. Silas's instincts flared. "Get down," he hissed. Gunfire shattered the stillness. Silas pushed Elena behind a crate as bullets tore through the night. Shadows lunged from the darkness, Black Lotus enforcers intent on silencing the truth. The fight was brutal and swift. Silas's movements were a blur. Every shot, every dodge, a life-or-death gamble. Mara's voice crackled over his radio, guiding him through the chaos. Together, they turned the tide, forcing the attackers to retreat into the mist. Breathing hard, Silas and Elena retreated to the safe house. The weight of the night settled over them, each revelation a step deeper into a world where trust was a weapon and betrayal a constant companion. As dawn broke, Silas realized the fight had grown larger than he'd imagined. The veil of deception was lifting, but the city's darkest secrets were only beginning to surface. The morning sun broke through thin clouds, casting a pale light over the city's jagged skyline. Yet inside the safe house, shadows clung stubbornly to every corner. Silas sat at the table, Elena across from him, both tired but driven by the urgency of what they'd uncovered. Elena's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. The Serpent's plan isn't just another drug shipment. They're orchestrating something catastrophic, a strike meant to destabilize the entire city government, forcing a crackdown that will give them even tighter control. Silas absorbed every word, the stakes soaring higher than ever before. Do you have proof? She slid a small flash drive across the table. Everything I could smuggle out before they realized I was gone. Vera joined them, having just finished a security sweep of their communications. We have to move fast. The Black Lotus won't wait, and neither can we. Together, the trio mapped out a plan. They would infiltrate the warehouses scheduled for the strike, intercept the weapons, and expose the conspiracy before it could ignite. The hours until nightfall stretched thin, each minute loaded with a sense of impending violence. Silas reviewed his gear, checking and rechecking. Every detail mattered. Mara's phone buzzed. A new intel drop. The strike is planned for midnight, 3 sites across the city. Silas's eyes darkened. This isn't just an attack. It's a declaration of war. Night fell, heavy and suffocating. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual hum of life muted under an unseen threat. Silas and Mara split up, each taking a site to cover, while Vera monitored from the safe house. Silas approached an old warehouse near the industrial district, its windows boarded and the air thick with the smell of oil and rust. He moved like a ghost through the shadows, every sense on high alert. Inside, crates of weapons lay stacked, men moving cautiously between them. Silas slipped closer, planting tracking devices and snapping photos with a small camera concealed in his jacket. The tension was electric. One wrong move could ignite a firefight. Suddenly, a voice whispered behind him, "You're far from home, detective." Silas spun, gun drawn, to see a figure emerging from the shadows, the Serpent's lieutenant. "No more games," the man said, cold and menacing. The warehouse became a battleground. Bullets flew, crates shattered, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder. The fight pushed Silas to the edge, every move a desperate dance between survival and mission. With Mara's timely arrival, they gained the upper hand, securing the warehouse and sending the Black Lotus retreating. But the victory was hollow. The strike was only partially foiled. 2 other sites remained active. Reunited at the safe house, the team's resolve hardened. The city's fate hung in the balance. Silas gazed out at the rain-washed streets, his voice low but fierce. "We stopped this tonight. No more shadows, no more lies." The eternal dark was closing in, but so was the dawn. The city was suffocating beneath a heavy blanket of fog, its skeletal skyline blurred and softened by the damp air. Silas Kane stood on the rooftop of the safe house, the cold wind tugging at his coat as he watched the slow pulse of the streets below. Every light seemed like a beacon fighting to stay alive against the encroaching darkness. But Silas knew better. Beneath that fragile glow, the shadows writhed and stirred, plotting the next move. Mara appeared behind him, her footsteps silent on the cracked concrete. "You're awake early," she said quietly, her voice a mix of concern and weariness. Silas didn't turn. "Too many ghosts to chase in my head." She leaned against the railing, eyes scanning the distant horizon. "The strike yesterday was only part of the plan. We stopped one site, but the others they hit hard." He nodded, voice low. "We're running out of time. The city's bleeding, and the ones pulling the strings are tightening their grip." Inside the safe house, Vera was already working, her fingers flying over multiple keyboards as she hacked into layers of encrypted data. Her screen was a swirling cascade of code, maps, and live feeds. The air hummed with the electricity of urgency. "We've intercepted chatter," Vera said without looking up. "The remaining 2 strike sites are preparing for another wave. They're planning simultaneous attacks at midnight." Silas clenched his fists. "They want to tear this city apart." Mara's face was grim. "And we need to stop them. But there's something else, something bigger. The Black Lotus isn't just about violence anymore. They want control over everything." Silas paced the cramped room, thoughts racing. The mole, the whistleblower Elena, the recent strikes, all threads in a web woven tighter than ever. "Who else is involved?" he asked, looking at Mara and Vera. Vera pulled up a file. "We've uncovered financial ties linking the Black Lotus to a powerful councilman. Someone with influence over the police, the courts, even the media." Mara's eyes flashed with anger. A fractured alliance of corruption. Silas's jaw tightened. "We're fighting more than gangs now. It's the entire system." That evening, the trio gathered to plan their next move. The clock was ticking down toward midnight, the moment when chaos threatened to explode across the city. "We split up," Silas said. "Mara, you take the northern site. I'll cover the southern one. Vera, you stay here and monitor." Mara nodded, checking her weapon. "Be careful." Silas gave a faint smile, masking the dread beneath. "You too." The night was thick with rain as Silas approached the southern warehouse district. The streets were slick and deserted, save for the occasional flicker of movement. Shadows clung to the crumbling facades, whispering secrets only the brave or foolish dare to hear. Inside the warehouse, crates marked with ominous symbols were stacked high. Silas moved like a ghost, every muscle taut, every sense alive. The tension was a live wire running through his veins. Suddenly, voices echoed from a hidden corner. Silas crouched low, peering into the gloom. A group of armed men huddled around a table, maps and plans spread before them. "This is it," one said. "Tonight, the city falls." Silas's heart hammered. The moment to strike was imminent. Just as he was about to retreat and radio Mara, a shadow fell over him. Hands grabbed him roughly, dragging him into the darkness. A familiar voice hissed in his ear. "Thought you could sneak in unnoticed, Kane?" It was the Serpent's lieutenant again. The fight was brutal and immediate. Silas twisted free, fists and feet flying in a deadly rhythm. Each blow was a message. Justice was coming, no matter the cost. Gunfire erupted outside as Mara engaged the northern site's guards, her fierce determination echoing through the rain. Back inside, Silas faced down the lieutenant in a desperate battle. Steel clashed, and the air was thick with sweat and grit. The warehouse was a cage of violence, every corner hiding a new threat. Silas fought with the weight of the city on his shoulders, the betrayed, the innocent, the desperate. When Mara burst through the door, the lieutenant snarled and retreated into the shadows. Silas was left breathless but unbroken. "We don't have much time," Mara warned. "The others are moving." They planted explosives to disrupt the shipments and fled into the stormy night, sirens wailing in the distance. The city was a tinderbox, and they had bought it a few precious minutes to empty the safe house. Vera's fingers danced across her keyboard, tracking the chaos in real time. "They're trying to regroup, but we've fractured their alliance." Silas looked at Mara, determination burning in his eyes. "We're not done yet." The city lay beneath them, fractured, bleeding, but not broken. And Silas Kane would fight to ensure the darkness never claimed it. The rain hammered down, drumming a relentless tattoo on the rooftops and streets as Silas and Mara slipped through back alleys toward their rendezvous point. The city seemed alive with menace, the wet asphalt reflecting neon signs flickering like dying fireflies. Every shadow could conceal a threat, every footstep behind them a harbinger of death. Mara's voice crackled through Silas's earpiece, taut and urgent. "We need to regroup. This fight's bigger than we thought." They're not just striking, they're trying to send a message. Silas scanned the darkened windows of shuttered shops, senses razor sharp. Message or warning, we can't let them win. The night air was thick with tension, each breath sharp and cold. Their meet-up. A derelict parking garage reeking of oil and rust. Vera waited with a grim expression. Her fingers flew over a tablet, eyes scanning feed from hidden cameras placed near the other strike sites. The Black Lotus is retreating, but they're regrouping fast, Vera said, voice tight with worry. There's chatter about reinforcements. Mercenaries from overseas, skilled and ruthless. Silas exchanged a look with Mara. The war had escalated beyond street gangs to something darker and deadlier. The trio's next move was to intercept the reinforcements before they could strengthen the Black Lotus's grip on the city. It meant crossing into enemy territory, an abandoned shipyard on the city's edge where crates were being unloaded under heavy guard. Silas, Mara, and Vera prepared with grim resolve. Their plan was audacious. Infiltrate the dock, sabotage the shipments, and capture the mercenary leader to cripple the enemy's chain of command. Under the cloak of darkness, they moved like shadows across the rusting cranes and creaking cargo holds. The scent of salt water mixed with oil and sweat. Every step was calculated, every sound amplified in the stillness. Vera hacked into the ship's security system, disabling cameras one by one. "You've got 5 minutes before the guards notice," she whispered over the comms. Silas's heart pounded as they slipped inside a cargo container packed with crates labeled only with cryptic codes. Suddenly, a pair of guards appeared, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Mara moved like lightning, silently incapacitating one with a chokehold while Silas subdued the other with precision. "Too close," Mara muttered, eyes scanning for more threats. Inside the container, they found weapons caches, guns, explosives, and crates filled with strange devices Silas had never seen before. "This isn't just arms," he said, voice low. "This is high-tech warfare." Vera's screen flashed a new alert. The mercenary leader was on sight, moving closer. The tension snapped as footsteps echoed. Heavy boots, voices in a foreign tongue. Silas's muscles tensed, ready for the fight. The mercenary leader appeared, a towering figure with cold eyes and a cruel smile. "You should have stayed in the shadows, Kane." The battle that followed was fierce and brutal. Silas's every move was tested against the mercenary's strength and skill. Mara and Vera fought valiantly alongside him, the night exploding into a whirlwind of fists, gunfire, and determination. Despite the odds, Silas managed to disarm and capture the mercenary leader, securing vital intelligence that could unravel the Black Lotus's plans further. Exhausted but resolute, they retreated to the safe house. Knowing this was but a single victory in a war far from over, as dawn crept through the blinds. Silas stared at the city below, scars both physical and invisible, marking the fight. The fractured alliance of crime and corruption was breaking. But so was the fragile hope that justice might prevail, he whispered to himself. This is only the beginning. The city lay beneath a velvet sky, the horizon streaked with the last embers of dying twilight. From his vantage point atop the crumbling rooftop, Silas Kane could see the endless maze of streets shimmering with scattered lights, each a fragile pulse in the encroaching darkness. The cold wind bit through his coat, carrying the distant hum of sirens, the murmurs of restless souls, and the ever-present thrum of danger. Tonight was the night. The final move in a long, brutal game, a gambit that could either shatter the city's criminal empire or bury Silas beneath its ruins forever. He pulled his collar higher, eyes narrowing. The Black Lotus's stronghold lay just blocks away, a fortress wrapped in shadows and guarded by men who would kill without hesitation. But Silas wasn't afraid. Fear had long since been a ghost he'd learned to live with. Beside him, Mara stepped forward, her dark eyes sharp beneath the hood of her jacket. "You ready?" Silas met her gaze, feeling the weight of years of struggle and loss reflected back. "I've never been more ready." They slipped through the maze of alleys, moving like ghosts beneath flickering streetlights and shuttered windows. The city was holding its breath, and so was Silas. Every step echoed the countless nights spent chasing shadows, peeling back layers of lies and betrayal. The safe house was a distant memory. Tonight, there would be no retreat. The stakes were higher than ever. The fortress was a monolith of steel and concrete, surrounded by razor wire and patrolling guards. Cameras blinked cold, red eyes, scanning relentlessly for any sign of movement. It was a place designed to keep secrets, and Silas intended to steal them. That Vera's voice crackled softly in his earpiece. "I'm inside their security grid. Cameras are going dark for 60 seconds. Move fast." Silas and Mara moved with precision, neutralizing guards silently, their movements a deadly ballet. Each breath was measured, each heartbeat a countdown. Inside the fortress, the air was thick and stale, smelling of machine oil and fear. The corridors twisted like veins, carrying whispers of conspiracy and death. They reached the control room, a cathedral of blinking screens and humming servers. Silas set to work downloading files that could dismantle the Black Lotus's entire operation. The room seemed to close in around them, the weight of countless lies pressing down. Then the door slammed open. The Serpent's lieutenant stood framed in the doorway, flanked by armed guards. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Well, Kane," he said softly, "you're in deeper than you realize." Gunfire erupted. Silas and Mara fought with ferocity born of desperation. Bullets tore through the stale air, glass shattered, and the dance of death unfolded. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with the stale air as Silas dropped low behind a bank of monitors, the sharp crack of bullets ricocheting off metal ringing in his ears. His heart hammered, not just from the fight, but from the weight of everything riding on this moment. Years of chasing shadows, lies, and broken promises boiled down to this desperate battle inside the heart of the enemy's fortress. That Mara's voice was a steady anchor over the comms. "Silas, cover me. I'm moving left." With practiced precision, Silas shifted his position, firing controlled bursts to suppress the advancing guards. Each pull of the trigger was a promise, a vow that the city's darkness would not consume them without a fight. The lieutenant, tall and cold, advanced with cruel intent, his own weapon barking death. Silas met him head-on, their eyes locking briefly. A clash of wills more than weapons. Fists collided amid the chaos, steel against flesh. Silas moved like a shadow, every strike a memory of the pain and loss that had shaped him. The lieutenant fought back fiercely, but Silas's resolve was harder, forged in the fire of betrayal and relentless pursuit of justice. Around them, Mara was a whirlwind of precision and grace, dispatching enemies with swift efficiency. Her eyes never lost focus, her every movement calculated to protect the fragile hope they carried. Suddenly, the lieutenant pulled a knife, slashing with deadly speed. Silas barely dodged, a shallow cut grazing his arm. Pain flared, sharp and burning, but he pushed it down. There was no room for weakness. Not tonight. In a swift counter, Silas disarmed the lieutenant, twisting the knife from his grasp and forcing him to the ground. The fight drained from the man's eyes, replaced by something darker, a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. Outside, sirens wailed, growing louder as police forces surrounded the stronghold, tipped off by Vera's relentless hacking. The tide was turning. Silas cuffed the lieutenant, breathing hard. "It's over." Mara nodded, eyes scanning for any last threats. "We did it." The files Silas had downloaded were more than just evidence. They were the key to dismantling an empire built on blood, lies, and fear. As police streamed into the building, arrests began. Outside, the first light of dawn bled into the sky, washing the city in soft gold. The battle was won, But the war was far from over. Silas stood on the steps of the fortress, the weight of the night settling around him like a cloak. He looked up at the awakening city, voice barely a whisper. The eternal dark may never fully fade, but tonight, we've pushed back the shadows.